Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have America the Good Ending, cross post from the r/the campaign trail, and I posted that. And that was taken from the new 2008 Liberty and Liberalism mod from the campaign trail, and that's a game where you can replay historic presidential elections. And this one was a election where Ron Paul was running against John Kerry, who had previously won in 2004, unlike in real life. And in my my ending, I got Ron Paul to carry like 41 states or so and 392 electoral votes. And yeah, I definitely would consider that the good ending. And if that was the case, we would have a government with less taxes, less government, less control, and that's my thoughts on that issue. It's a shame that he never won in real life, but I'm glad we can at least make him win in this fictional game, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we have the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The key legislative achievement in the first year of the Donald Trump administration substantially raised the federal debt and disproportionately increased incomes for the most affluent. The effects on economic growth and median wages were modest at best, from aeaweb.org. And my thoughts on that are, all the presidents say they're going to help the economy, but none of them really do, I don't think. Could this have helped? Maybe a little, but it's not really helping. The problem is the government's involved with private business at all, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have lawmakers renew push to hold federal officials accountable for civil rights violations from NBCNews.com by Ninja Lover, and they added, Democratic lawmakers are mounting a new attempt to ensure that federal officials, including thousands of law enforcement officers, can be individually sued for constitutional violations such as the use of excessive force. And I guess that's good. Ultimately, I do think we need to hold the police accountable, just like we need to hold the entire state accountable, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have J.D. Vance called pregnancy from rape inconvenient from politicalwire.com by CH4Locks, and I would disagree with that assertion. I personally think I think it would be bad to get pregnant from rape, but with that being said, I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their own bodies. If they want to carry a rape baby to term, they should be able to, and that's my thoughts on that issue. That's why I personally agree more with the Democrats on abortion than the Republicans. And yeah, I personally would love to have everyone be born if they wanted to be born, but sadly, I think it's a bodily autonomy issue. I think if humans laid eggs, I would be more on the pro-life side, but as is now, if the baby growing inside, I think I'm more on the pro-choice side, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Texas professors want to use abortion ban to punish students for consensual sexual intercourse from Salon.com by CH4Locks. And yeah, I don't think that's good either. But with that being said, I'm sure that, the left would love to punish people for not getting an abortion if they could. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Because, abortions are kind of like a sacrament to the left at this point. That's why I really don't care for the left's rhetoric on abortion. It went from safe, legal, and rare in the Bill Clinton days to abortions are the best things ever currently. Then we have Samuel P. Huntington from Malatesta Fiesta, and that was a quote from Samuel P. Huntington they shared. The West who won the world, not by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, but rather by its superiority in applying organized violence. Westerners often forget this fact. Non-Westerners never do. Samuel P. Huntington, American political scientist, advisor, and academic, 1927 to 2008. And I said, it wasn't that kind of Jared Diamond's hypothesis. I linked to the Wikipedia page for the book Guns, Germs, and Steels. And then that was... And that Jared Diamond, those were the big three reasons that the West kind of took over the world. They had the guns, they could spread deadly diseases like to the Native Americans, the germs, and they had the steel. And he also adds that, since Eurasia, its continental axis is longer west to east and north to south, there was more room for fertile area to grow, and that's another reason he insists the West won the world. And I guess, ultimately, it comes down to the factors that were beyond, I think, anyone's control as to why the West succeeded, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Revelatory bombshell. Secret probe of Trump. Suspicious Egypt money shut down by Barr's DOJ. WAPO. MSNBC from MSNBC, and that's from Winter Trabex. And yeah, I personally think all politicians are corrupt. But MSNBC only seems scared that Donald Trump is and the Republicans are corrupt, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, among the many hilarious parts of the CNN video is that after the black men explain their views on Kamala and race, the white man of authority calls them stupid and says that that's not how the majority of black people think, which he knows because his black friends told him so. From Glenn Reedwell, and that was him quote tweeting Tom Elliott. Black guys at Harrisburg Barbershop told local CBS reporter that Kamala Harris isn't really black to me. No. And I said in response, honestly, Kamala just might be the politician who breaks the identity politics narrative for good. At least I hope so. And I linked to a tweet from Eric Abinati, who said, Kamala thinks that the cloud would literally exist above us, and it's not a physical thing, even though the cloud very much is a physical thing when it comes to technology. And I added, yeah, her own staff doesn't even like her, and I linked to a tweet from Defiant Elves about how a bunch of her own staff resigned in 2020. I personally think, if you want to destroy identity politics for good, I think maybe having her in the White House might be the better long-term option. We already had Trump, and they just doubled down under identity politics under him. Maybe if President Kamala will finally cause backlash to identity politics, and more people start to acknowledge that she's unfit for the job because she was only chosen because of her race and gender. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump says he'll debate Harris on Fox News, or not at all, after weeks of back and forth over ABC News event from CNN, and I posted that, and I said, Harris is asked at public speaking, Trump would be a fool not to debate her, regardless of venue. And, yeah, ultimately, I personally think the debate's probably going to be biased. Might as well, they had SpongeBob and Patrick host the Super Bowl and Kids' Choice Awards Nickelodeon this year. Might be having to host the presidential debate as well. But then, that's why maybe we should have like a non-political channel. So that's why I'm going off that. But that being said, ultimately every debate's going to be biased to its own extent. So that's why, I think increasingly debates are falling by the wayside as people increasingly know they're just ways to get them. Like to say, quips that might hurt them later, like binders full of women or black jobs, for an example. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have public masturbation stories in NYC with sickos pleasuring and exposing themselves in the open up 51% from NY Post, and I posted that and I said, surprised they could go outside and get off Reddit. And I also added another comment, I personally think libertarian position is for public masturbation that should be legal but stigmatized. I don't particularly care if people masturbating in public. With that being said, sometimes you might see something you don't like and you might just have to cope with it. As long as you're not being physically hurt, I think that's libertarians believe people should be doing whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anyone else. And yeah, that's my fault on that issue. I don't really care for it. I don't like it. Just like how I don't care how they march. A lot of people are increasingly marching naked during the gay pride parades. But with that being said, it's by definition a victimless crime, I kind of think, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have. They not only want to kill him, their apologists want you to pretend not to acknowledge it, from Michael Malice on Twitter, and I posted that, and that was him quote tweeting Tim Miller. J.D. Vance just said they even tried to kill him about Trump. This is a deeply irresponsible lie, and if he had one iota of integrity left, he would stop. And I said in response, it's not a lie if you believe it, George Costanza, and he said that in Seinfeld. And, ultimately, it depends. So I think some of the media know they're lying when they say stuff like this, but, some of them I think really have such severe TDS at this point, I don't even think they might even think it's the truth, I think, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And I also added, I'm pretty sure that pretty much everyone on the left wanted that bullet tip, whether they were to tell you or not, but like with Ahab getting Moby Dick, Tom getting Jerry, and the Wile E. Coyote getting the Roadrunner, it's simply not meant to be. And they said, what's TDS? I said, TDS is when you think you finally got him this time for marriage every day over the past decade. And, yeah, that's my thoughts there. When you treat Trump like he's Jason Voorhees and always round the corner out to get you, that makes you a TDS sufferer, and this is how Reddit seems to view him. And, of course, Reddit's like, oh, who is they? That's all they can go. They only say, oh, who is they? They're unable to extrapolate, things like this to the bigger picture, and that's my thoughts there. Then we have the 14 typical elements of fraternal fascism, or fascism, Umberto Eco from CH Relax, and that's the self-post they made. And they said, one, the closed tradition. One is only to look at the syllabus of every fascist movement to find the major traditionalist thinkers. The Nazi gnosis was nourished by traditionalist, syncretist, and occult elements. And my thoughts on that are, eventually you do have the cult of tradition, but I would argue the cult of progress as well is increasingly becoming one that seeks to control people. Then we have two, the rejection of modernism. The Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, is seen as the beginning of modern depravity. In this sense, fascism can be defined as irrationalism. And, I think that for the left, that would be the over-embracement of modernism and postmodernism, saying, oh, things don't matter anymore, so you have to obey all the rules I tell you. 3. The code of action for action sale. Action being beautiful in itself must be taken forward without any previous reflection, thinking of as a form of emasculation. 4. Disagreement is treason. The critical spirit makes distinctions and distinguishes the sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community embraces disagreement as a way to improve knowledge. And increasingly, that's all over the political spectrum, and everyone wants their circle to work. No one wants any disagreement. 5. Fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist or premature fascist movement is an appeal against the intruders. Thus, fascism is racist by definition. And increasingly, people on all sides of the political spectrum fear those who dissent at all or are different at all, and that's my faults there. Then we have 6, appeal to social frustration. One of the most typical features of historical fascism was the appeal to a frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups. 7, the obsession with a plot. The followers must feel besieged. The easiest way to solve plots is to appeal to xenophobia. 8. The enemies both weak and strong. The followers must be convinced that they can overwhelm the enemies. Thus, by a continuous shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak. You definitely see that over the political spectrum these days, too. 9. Pacifism is trafficking of the enemy. For fascism, there is no struggle for life, but rather life is lived for struggle. 10. Contempt for the weak. Elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology. 11. Everybody is entitled to educate to become a hero. Under fascism ideology, heroism is the norm. The cult of heroism is strictly linked to the cult of death. 12. Machismo and weaponry. This is the origin of machismo, which implies both disdain for women and intolerance in combination of non-centered sexual habits from chastity to homosexuality. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an irrational phallic exercise. 13. Selective populism. This is our feature of a TV or internet populism, in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented or accepted as the voices of people. 14. Fascism speaks newspeak. All of Nazis and fascist school books made use of improvised vocabulary and on elementary syntax, in which or limit the instruments of their complex and critical reasoning. And yeah, I definitely do think you see increasingly that on all sides of the political spectrum, everyone increasingly seeks to control the narrative and in regards to their authoritarianism, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have the foolish and deranged ideology of J.K. Rowling from wintertrabex.substack.com by Winter Trabex, and I said, and when Lemon Limelight said, who's historical and then lines that follow transgender issues closer than most people, but not J.K. Rowling really. So when I saw Electric Electricity for gaining traction, the controversy usually seems overblown. She's maybe a crotchety, but not seem monster opponents see her as. So with that being said, I read this and it doesn't really persuade me for foolish and depraved ideology. If I'm not this intended audience, that's fine, but I do agree with you /megaphallic obsessions over every J.K. Rowling burble on trans issues often makes her opponents look worse to casual observers. And I said in response, if you think this is bad, check out AOP's other work. And I linked to an article from Winter Trabex they made for the Manchester Ink Link, published April 2nd, 2024. And it said essay, anti-trans hatred in America, not unlike anti-Jewish hatred in Germany. They obviously are very much into the trans genocide narrative, and that's more. I think that's those people I think are more terminally aligned people when they think that they're the trans genocide. Where they think that transgender people are literally treated worse than the Jews during the Holocaust, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have fascism and the non-aggression principle among libertarians from wintertrabex.substack.com by Winter Trabex. And yeah, this is just another kind of circle jerk post they made about how libertarianism is pretty much fascism, because sometimes they don't live 100% by the non-aggression principle sometimes. And that's just them kind of being circle jerking how sometimes people don't live 100% by their ideology, and sometimes people can be hypocritical. I don't think that's the reason to have a hissy fit over it, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have J.D. Vance is the baby of big tech and big oil. He's no working class populist. Jan Werner Mueller from TheGuardian.com by 408-414-6225. And yeah, I definitely agree. J.D. Vance is not on our side, just like the Democrats aren't on our side. None of the elites are on your side. It's a big club and you ain't in it. That's what George Carlin used to say, and that's pretty much where it always holds true when it comes to politics. Then we have the cops in the UK who are just following orders from the new government on more conservative protesters, and if little girls being stabbed to death, either way, things are going to get much worse one way or another. From Michael Malice on Twitter, and that was him sharing an article. More sword not inevitable, says police chief Nick Erdley, political correspondent, sheriff of the National Police Chief Consley Gonzalez, said more sword is not inevitable, yada 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 yada. And I said in response, I thought riots were the language of the unheard, but I guess that's just when the in-group does them. And then Will Power 69 replied, do conservatives need to stoke fear constantly? And I said, Reddit, conservatives need to stoke fear constantly. Also Reddit, the orange man is going to put us in the camps any day now. So, everyone wants to stoke their fear. It's really just depends if you're out-group or in-group these days. And that's pretty much all that's relevant at all when it comes to politics. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.